The central banking community is drunk driving with the money, and the blockchain community is taking the keys away from the drunk drivers.
I don't like being lied to by the government. I used to call them the Bureau of Lying Statistics, and then I had to change that to the Bureau of Lagging Statistics.
This dollar has lost 96% of its value in 50 years. What the hell are you guys doing? Blockchain is a better tool. Okay, well, we're not going to adopt it. The American banking lobbyists, and they don't want to adopt it, and so they're going to put money into the coffers of the Congress, and they're going to stop the adoption.
Well, I don't like being lied to by the government, and I don't think any of us do. And that's why I'm super excited to have Anthony Scaramucci join us and join me on this podcast. And, you know, I can't express it again.
Who's lying to you from the government, Stefan? Who's lying to you from the government?
All those statistics. We call them the Bureau of, I've had to change my wording. I used to call them the Bureau of Lying Statistics, and then I had to change that to the Bureau of Lagging Statistics.
You know, there's that very famous cliche, you know, there are lies, and there are damn lies, and there are statistics, right? Those are the categories of the depth of lying. Once you start using statistics, you can really fortify the lie. But I think this is one of the more brilliant things, frankly, about your journey and the brilliant things about what you guys are doing. I mean, you're literally getting a real-time assessment of where things stand, and I think it's something that I'm always puzzled by why it hasn't been adopted yet. You know, that's the thing that's a great puzzlement for me, because it's just a better tool. So if you have better tools, you know, this is the weird thing about our lives now. The blockchain is a better tool. Okay, well, we're not going to adopt it. Why? Well, we have the American banking lobbyists, and they don't want to adopt it, and so they're going to put money into the coffers of the Congress, and they're going to stop the adoption. Oh, okay. And you got Elizabeth Warren. She's apparently for the poor, but she's spewing talking points from the American Banking Association. So you're sitting there saying, okay, how are we going to do it? But generally, when there is better technology, generally throughout history, when there's better technology, it ends up getting adopted, it ends up getting used, you know, generally.
Yeah. And I think we've seen that, right? I mean, Bitcoin's been around since, 2009, 2010, 2011. It's grown. You know, I was very fortunate to get in very early by a developer asking me to pay them in Bitcoin. So that was an amazing journey. But you know, despite everything, this is now, I think if we look back and you look at this industry that's now morphed into this $3 trillion industry over the course of 10 to 15 years, that's pretty amazing, despite all of those challenges that you mentioned. I think it's an amazing progress. And what I tried to do was try to use basically this decentralized ledger, convert it into a database, and put the data on there and have data verified by individuals and systems that would allow for us, and anybody, by the way, to access all of this data and build their own indexes off the back of it. We just launched with the inflation index, and I think, you know, again, shout out to you for really giving us the visibility, you know, on the World Economic Forum stage, as you did, and just highlighting new technology.
My pleasure. And again, you have a great product. I'm on your website a lot, by the way, you know, and I think you know Anthony Pompliano, and him and I talk about it a lot. He brings it up a lot. You know, I had breakfast with him after I got back from the World Economic Forum and said, Ant, you got to look at this stuff. It was a young computer programmer that introduced me to your product. He was a Carnegie Mellon young man, maybe 25, 26, and he said, listen, take a look at this data, and you'll find that this data is more accurate. Now, the weird thing about it is we have an arbitrage now between the accurate data and the data that the government wants to use to make policy decisions. So that's a weird thing, isn't it? That I have a better tool for you. You know, here's a surgical tool that I can operate on your body with, and it's better, and it'll cause you less pain, and you'll recover faster. But excuse me, pass me the chainsaw, or we're going to go operate on your body. You know, so. But you'll get there. You know, you'll get there. Your business and who you guys are, and as smarter, younger people get into the government, one of the biggest problems in America right now is the political sclerosis. We've got a 79-year-old president. We had an 81-year-old president, so we picked up a younger president. We got a 79-year-old president. We've got 200-year-old people, I guess, in the Congress. You know, I don't know. It's bad.
But we do have this SWAT team. I mean, the Doge team that's in there, that's a bunch of young Canucks going in there, smart, highly savvy, and have been talking about blockchain a lot. And we've written some open letters. And by the way, we have acquired some, we're now at about 300 to 400,000 monthly active users, depending on the month and depending on, but generally we're actually extremely visible, got a lot of attention, but people still want us to slow down our calculations, move and correlate, sort of edit the numbers so that we're as corrupt as an old numbers that the government's using, so that we can help them predict the actual government numbers better, so that they can actually trade on the $5.5 trillion worth of inflation protected assets, which is really funny.
Yeah, well, listen, congratulations. I guess the issue now before us, though, is what's going to happen to the global economy, and why is the world resetting or reformatting itself at this time? Because I would make the case that we've had some failure, no question. We've had some problems, no question. But generally, the post-World War II architecture that has stabilized Europe, lots of parts of Asia, certainly the Gulf nations have benefited from this. If you asked the people in Bahrain or the UAE, it's nothing short of incredible how much prosperity and rising living standards. And so now we do have a populist dilemma going on. We've had people, policy missteps that have led to a very large group of people in this country, other countries like the United Kingdom and France, to be dissatisfied. You've got people that have felt that they haven't gotten a fair shake from the system. These are the people that vote for Le Pen. These are the people that voted for the Brexit. Yep. These are people that vote for Donald Trump. And by the way, even on the left, Bernie Sanders represents these people. And they do have a grievance, Stefan. They are correct that the wealthy have gotten much wealthier. Living standards for the lower and middle income people have not caught up. They're certainly better than they were 50 years ago. People have better televisions and more efficient heat and better cars, but they just haven't caught up to where the wealthy are. And when you have a society that has now the embed of social media, you can create a lot of envy. You can create a lot of jealousy and a lot of sore feelings towards each other. And then, of course, our adversaries take advantage of us by dumping tremendous amounts of disinformation into our system, tremendous amounts. And so that's where we are now. So you have a risk where we split into a multipolar world where China is controlling a sleeve of the world, Russia, which is sort of astonishing to me because they have less GDP than the state of Texas. They're even smaller now than the Italy, which is, people don't realize because they vacation there. That's fairly, still in the north, a fairly industrious country, but they have a higher GDP than Russia. Russia has more military might and focus more on nuclear weaponry, but you're heading for trouble. The global economy is heading for trouble. If we're going to tariff up and we're going to start a trade war, your Truflation numbers are going to go up, okay? Because if you can't get a car into the country, or if you're telling me the U.S. is manufacturing in the United States, but they're shipping parts for refinishing into Canada, and then they got to come back to the United States, now those parts that go into the car are going to be 50% more, or you're telling me the aluminum, which is 78% of it is coming from Canada, we're going to now hit it with a 25% surcharge. You're going to knock these American cars up in price $15,000 a piece. So So to me, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing or what they're thinking, but you have a potential for a dystopian situation to unfold. And I'll just make one last point. I'd love to get you to react to it. We're setting ourselves up for some level of distrust because we're saying to the Europeans, fuck off, if you don't mind my bold language. That's exactly what we're saying. We're saying that you're on your own. We're telling the Canadians that we're going to absorb them, I guess, maybe take them over. I don't know exactly what he's saying. He's saying that he wants to take over Greenland and Canada and the Panama Canal. I don't know. If he's serious about that, we'll be at war with NATO. So not only will he pull the United States out of NATO, he'll declare war. I don't know. Am I again? I'm going off of what he's saying. I'm not saying this. I'm going off of what he's saying, and none of it makes sense. And yet you'd say, well, aren't there people? You know, when I was 7 years old, Stefan, I read some fascinating literature called "The Emperor Has No Clothes." Yep. And I remember reading the story, the parable, and saying, well, that's ridiculous. I'm 7. Of course I would tell somebody that they have no clothes. Now I'm 61. It's 54 years since I read that story, and I'm watching 60-year-old men and women tell somebody that has no clothes that he has clothes on. So I don't know.
I mean, I have sort of mixed sort of emotions associated with that. I mean, ultimately, I was born in different countries. I've moved around. I've lived in different countries. I've always believed in, borders are there just to sort of, they're a black line on a piece of paper kind of thing. But then on the flip side, I look at, the term he comes up with a lot is called reciprocity, right? And in a way, I do sort of buy in the fact that if you're charging me, and I launched my first startup in China. And when China was applying for the WTO and really hell-bent on getting into the WTO, China had extremely radical concessions that you need to engage with in order to get in and enter into that market. And we were all star-eyed, a billion people, that population. If only we can sell one chewing gum to every person, we've got 1 billion people buying chewing gum. And that fallacy fell flat on the feet because ultimately the only way you could enter was you needed to set up a joint venture. You needed to train local people. You needed to hire representatives from the Communist Party on your board so that they could monitor and track everything.
No question.
And ultimately, that led to a lot of IP transfer.
Yeah, no question.
Now, to the credit of Chinese, they are entrepreneurial, and they did leave and start up, and they still do that in their own companies. So it's no different whether they do that in a joint venture, which is with a foreign entity, or they do that in their own companies. I mean, they are just a nation of they work bloody hard, right? I mean, and so you have that, and so why not, coming back to the reciprocity, why don't we not have that as a fair trading ground? U.S. technology companies, should they not be able to export into China if we can import their goods? If they don't want it and they don't use it, they won't use it. And that's then a very market-driven opportunity or loss that somebody will encounter. I mean, I don't know whether Canadians or the French will want American cheese or not. I don't see that being a big factor in trade, but I do see, reciprocity, I think, is actually going to be what the WTO was trying to achieve, but actually never got round to achieving it.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we got some things wrong, sir. So I'll admit this to you. At the age of 29. When the American working class families and some of the hard left were moving on Seattle, Washington in the summer of 1999, there was a very big protest there.
Yeah.
You remember this? Yeah, the World Trade Organization protest. They did not want the Chinese to be in the WTO. Yeah. And then they said something which was true. They said it's a big economy. If you bring them in under emerging country status, they're going to get all these benefits and all these protections for their market, and they're going to dump products into our market, and it's very bad. It's going to be very bad for us. And we didn't listen. And I was a young Wall Streeter, very smug, very arrogant at the time. I said, oh, these guys are stupid. We'll get lower cost of goods, lower cost of services, higher returns on equity capital for the companies. This is a great idea, and it'll also help the Chinese economy, and the rising tide is going to lift all boats. But we were derelict in our duties. We practiced malpractice, frankly, both sides, Republicans and Democrats. We didn't adjust the trading system. We should have said, okay, you're going to get this treatment for 3 years. By 2003, it's going to go to that treatment. By 2009, it's going to be this treatment, and the playing field could have become more level. You know, Trump is right about aspects of the reciprocal tariffs. He is right that if you want to take your tariffs down, we'll take our tariffs down. We can go to a zero tariff option. He is right. He's wrong that it should apply everywhere, because there are cases, frankly, where we need to allow countries to come into our market unfettered, and we need to allow them to protect themselves a little bit, as they are smaller countries perhaps, and they need our help, and we want those countries to stay free. We want those countries to be democratic, if you will. We want them to live in democracies. And so I mean, that was a State Department protocol for the last 80 years. So I don't see why we need to put all of this into the paper shredder. And I don't understand the longer term argument. You know, the Bannon-Donald Trump argument is wall the country off, literally and physically, from the rest of the world. That's the argument. And put our tanks and our troops, and we'll just surround ourselves, and so that you can't attack us, and go kill yourselves. But you know, you've got pestilence, you've got disease, famine, viruses. You know, there's a very famous short story by Edgar Allan Poe, and it's about the Mask of the Red Death. The very rich people are having a party. And they're having this great party. It's a masquerade party during the time of the plague. And one of the poor people dresses up as one of the rich people, and they've got the mask on. And they come into the party, and they shake everybody's hand. And then he takes the mask off, and he says, hey, I'm just letting you know that I have the plague. You guys thought you were insulated from the plague. I put a mask on, the red mask, the mask of the Red Death. I've showed up now. I infiltrated your party. And you're all going to have the plague now. And it's a short story. It's an allegory about whether you like it or not. We're drinking the same water. We're breathing the same air. We're sharing the same earth. We have to figure out a way to help each other.
But I mean, in a way, I look at it sort of also slightly. I mean, the wall cutting off, and I mean, those are. I'm definitely. I'm a global traveler. You know, I feel we need to travel. You know, we need to bond, and if we do not talk to each other, we don't understand each other. We don't communicate. We don't learn each other's cultures. And so, the best way to drive conversation is trades and negotiations and getting into meet each other, and that's the way we create a friendly planet. And so fostering that is really important. But the way I also look at it is, you know, the US the debt's now hitting 36, 37 trillion. It's insurmountable, right? And everybody, and sort of the view from a large portion is, you know, the US is funding a lot of the growth around the world. And I don't think it's totally true, but I mean, to a certain extent, it has validity. And then at the same time, you know, how do you fund that? And creating efficiencies, and what the Doge is trying to do, in my view, is governments have never had to restructure. Governments have never had to change. And now all of a sudden, I'm not just slowly pulling off the Band-Aid, I'm ripping that off super hard, and it's hurting. And it's hurting, and it's going really deep. And the wounds are definitely not healed. We're opening up those wounds, and there's blood coming out. And I think that's in the phase that we're in now. In Argentina, that worked really well, but Argentina is a tiny economy compared to the world's largest economy, that if that moves a needle, it moves the world's needle, right? And so I just think that, and we did a lot of work with Argentina, with Milei and his team to try and help. And they, contrary to the US, their government was really friendly and worked with us, sharing their data and what they had so that we could put that on the blockchain together with them, and they can now make it available to anybody. But going through that process in Argentina was really tough. There were protests on the street, people were unhappy, but ultimately that went from a nation of the Paris of Latin America to, poverty and debt and constantly being pulled up in front of the IMF and having to renegotiate.
It's brutal, and I think that I guess let me put this back to you. Where is the leadership? Like, if you're living in Switzerland now, so it's an incredibly well-run country, and I'll pay their politicians a compliment. They're mundane, Stefan.
Yeah.
Okay, they just want to do the job. They don't want to be on Twitter, and they don't want spotlights and cameras in front of them. So, but where like, you're in the forecasting, data collection, data gathering business. I mean, where are we going?
I think it's a bipolar world. It's China and the U.S. I mean, everybody's looking to China in the East, at least, and in the West, it's Europe is fragmented. I mean, Europe's not working. Europe, I think, but what the good thing is, now they have an enemy. They have Trump, so it might pull Europe together. And I think the roots are still very strong between US and Europe, even if with or without the government. So the government is just there to actually pull the population together. And maybe that's underlying, in good faith, that might be the blessing for Europe to actually come together and actually do something about their internal issues and try to pull together and build a state. Draghi's been trying to do that. Will they do that? I don't know, because you got Italy, you got what's happened with Le Pen right now, you got what's happening with Germany and Hungary. So it's a lot of fractions. So maybe it won't happen. But China is definitely stepping up. I think China has always been, under Deng Xiaoping, it was always stay subtle, stay hidden, don't take leadership roles. But now they've been forced to the foreground. They've been forced to play a significant role and take some sort of activity, even though they've got their own nation to worry about. But they do worry about their Belt and Road. Africa's theirs. They've taken over Africa. Africa's all of China. And the ports, by the way, brilliant strategy. I don't need I don't need bases and military bases around the world. I'll just have all the ports. And so I'll take over all the ports. And that's why they're blocking the sale of the Panama Canal to BlackRock. And I think they're going to start blocking more, getting more involved in acquisitions and mergers. Will they accept it to enter into their market? They know the legal system. And look what they did to Hong Kong. They overtook that with pure silence and utter legality. It was just lawfare. I mean, just pure. And they're going to do the same with Taiwan. They're going to go in, they're going to win them over, and legally they're just going to be elected. They're going to have their champions elected into cabinet, and they're going to add laws into the books that are then going to be adopted. And that's then going to mean we might as well return to China and be another special administrative. They'll hate me saying this, but yeah. Which is scary.
Listen, but I'm watching the Democratic leadership not pay attention to this. I think Trump likes it.
Yep.
Trump's attitude is let China control Taiwan, and are you ready for this? Australia. That's what Trump wants. He doesn't care. And that's your sleeve of the world. And Russia, you have this part of Eurasia. Europe, you're just a museum. Go on your way. You want to defend yourselves, great. If you don't, the Russians will take you guys over. and plunder your wealth. And I'll take Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal.
Game of risk.
Yeah, the Panama Canal sale may or may not go true, but Trump's not going to care. He'll move the military down there, and we'll be in a kinetic situation. Remember, we didn't want the rearmament. When they talk about the 2% threshold, they made it artificial. They made it low, and Eisenhower was the first head of NATO. He was the first Secretary General of NATO. He didn't want it even to be adhered to at 2%. He didn't want the Germans rearming. But now you're running this risk, Stefan, of nuclear proliferation contemporaneous with this sort of reset that they're trying to perpetrate on the world.
But nuclear, do you not think we have enough nuclear arms? I mean, what else do you want to, how many more weapons, nuclear weapons, do you want out there? And how are they going to be, are we just going to reduce them?
Well, the Poles are going to want them. They're not going to want the Russians back on their territory, so the Poles are going to want them. The Germans are going to want more of them. The French and the Brits are going to need, in their minds, need more of them. Yeah, we have too many right now.
Yeah.
But I think that their attitudes are going to be, we need them, and we need to protect ourselves. We had, the American mission at the end of the war was, we've got this. We're a benevolent democracy, not saying that we haven't had our faults, not saying we haven't done some miscues, whether it's Vietnam, Iraq, we can pick many of the miscues, but we've got this, and let us handle it, and if we handle it, there'll be less weapons out of the control of the free world, and let us handle it. Trump is saying, hey, fuck off. I don't want to handle this anymore, and good luck to everybody, and let the thing devolve. It's just a bad understanding of history, because like Thomas Hobbes would say to you, that we get our greatest level of peace when we have one hegemonic power that suppresses the internecine tribal conflicts that are out there. And whether it was Rome, Great Britain, the Dutch for a period of time, Spain, that's usually when you're getting your progress, less anxiety, less warfare, more economic growth, more scientific innovation. And so we're going to go back now. We're going to start fighting with each other, deploy resources. Trump has done something that the Americans don't really even understand. He's cut the expenditures to science. He's cut the NIH expenditures. He's cut the university R&D expenditures. Okay. This Ozempic that everybody's using was a fringe drug. Yep. It was originally signed up as an orphanage type of a drug. Yeah. Okay, yeah. It's now become a blockbuster drug. Yeah. Again, it's probably bad for you. I don't use it. You can tell by how fat my face is that I don't use it. But I'm just saying that, you want to wreck this whole thing. You want to collapse the health and innovation umbrella. You want to do that? Okay, do it.
But I mean, I've spent a lot of my career as an entrepreneur in various tech innovations, and I think today is the most exciting time to be alive. The amount of innovation taking place across blockchain, across AI, across medical, personalized medicine, DNA sequencing, and then not to mention the whole automotive and robotic scenes that are sort of transpiring as well. And that sort of pulls together a lot of people. At the moment, a lot of it's privately funded. It's funded by venture capitalists. It's probably R&D divisions inside businesses. But to me, I hope that science, that innovation, lets thrive. And if you look at blockchain, it wasn't. I don't know how the European government just issued a sort of warning yesterday that Bitcoin can only be transferred during banking hours. I don't know how you do that. How do you block peer-to-peer Bitcoin transfers and only during banking hours? How do you make Bitcoin an American-only currency? It's got mining fields around the world. Everybody's contributing to it. Everybody's, maintaining the nodes associated with it. And it's just, think that that is our saving grace. What do you think of Balaji's book, by the way, The Network State?
Well, he grew up pretty close to where I grew up. We know each other a long time. I think he's on to a lot of really smart ideas. I also think he understands the perils of the current macroeconomic policies that are being perpetrated by America. And I also think he's recognizing that the trust is gone in the system. Yep. And so this idea that we would have a network state where we would rely on the collectivity of the decentralization, right? I think he's basically saying, look, I mean, one of the best Balaji lines ever, and I'll share it with you. And by the way, I'm giving him credit on your show, but I effing steal it for myself on other shows. But Balaji once said to me that the central banking community is drunk driving with the money. Yeah. And the blockchain community, the decentral community, is taking the keys away from the drunk drivers. And so this notion that we can get back to a harder standard of money. We talk about Bitcoin. Yep. Many people in the world, particularly people my age, 60 plus, not ready for this adaptation, not ready for the adoption. But people that are 30 are looking at it saying, wait a minute, this dollar has lost 96% of its value in 50 years. What the hell are you guys doing? And so therefore, I have to move to a different standard. And I think what he's saying makes lots of sense. The question is, could it happen? I don't know. It'd have to require very big leaps from people that are currently in power right now to give up power. And what we have found in our civilization, that people that have power, they don't like giving it up. This is what made George Washington so unique. There's a great book on the 1780s and the 1790s by Jay Winnick. He wrote a book about that time, and Washington was the only political leader that said, hey, I'm good. I don't need a monarchy. I don't need my kids to be the king of the U.S. I'm good. I'm going back to my farm. Let somebody else run this thing. And he set up a system that was remarkably decentralized. So, the weird thing about Balaji, and I've said this to him, your decentralized state is actually the United States. The problem is, in the last 30 years, these two parties sort of fused, and they created the Demo-publicans, you know what I mean, yeah. Or the Republicrats, right? Yeah. But when they were separate and they were respecting the decentralized nature of the checks and balances in the system and the legal, judiciary, legislative branch against the executive branch, that flat decentralized system allowed for tremendous growth and prosperity. But they don't want to do that anymore, And this cycles, this happens, We had a group of people in England. They said they were smarter than the democracy, and they sided with Adolf Hitler. And 6 months later, Hitler was dropping bombs on their heads. I mean, we've had this happen to us before. It's not like this is the first time we're going in this direction. It's just that we don't have adept leadership right now to get us out of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and it's. I mean, one of the things in his book, or one of his analysis, is very much that you look at, in the past it was very much culturally, people would come together on a cultural background, and today people come together based on red or blue, right? Whatever you are. Yeah,
ideology.
I won't. Yeah, exactly. I won't venture out of my red. I won't venture out of my blue, right? And the whole family, then that becomes your family, and then hence you have these two new bipolar, sort of opposites, and there's no middle anymore. How do we get back to a middle?
I think it's leadership. I think Obama is going to go down very poorly, to be candid. I think there was a lot of hope for him, and he was going to be sort of this post-partisan president and try to be a great unifier. He was very dogmatic, and then he went very hard at the culture. And I think that Trump represents almost like a white lash, and Trump represents this sort of cultural movement against what Obama was trying to do. And, and the American people, I can't speak for Europe, but the American people are generally right of center on cultural issues. This is a funny story because I know Trump's personality. I mean, it's not funny because it's horrifying, but this is apropos to why he won. He had 5 guys who said they were no longer guys, they were women. 5 of them. And so they went and competed in women's sports. So 340 million people. He had 5 people that did this. Not very consequential. But Trump made this the cause celeb of the culture war. Yeah. And he ran one ad after the next, and people are like, oh, I hate this. I can't have my daughter competing against a man who now says he's a woman, And again, I'm not picking on those people. God bless the trans movement. God bless other sexual orientations in life. I have no problem with any of it, but I sort of feel like in America, if your birth certificate designated you a male or designated you a female, that's who you should be playing sports with. And by the way, that's the generally accepted opinion if you look at the polling. And Trump knew that, and he ran that ad to the point of ad nauseum, and the Democrats didn't even really know how to respond to it. And again, I'm for inclusion, but I think like in everything in life, just like there are limits of free speech, I can't go to the movie theater, yell fire, and I can't have hate screed that could potentially foment violence. There are limits to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, sure. It definitely, that whole transgender thing is very challenging. I mean, I don't know how to deal with it, but also in the grand picture, it's again equally a tiny portion of the overall population worldwide. And definitely, I think sort of a bit blown out of proportion. Although I'm a big athlete. I love my sports, and I'm a big swimmer, and there's no way women can keep up with the level of men at that same age group, right? Yeah. I mean, definitely.
It's just not fair,
It's not fair, no. And I think people were upset, and you're hitting a nerve about not fair, and I think that's what really took over.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do
what's
think
next? What's next for Truflation? Tell me. Let me interview you a little bit. What's next for Truflation? Where are we going?
Yeah, we're gonna. I mean, we have all this data now. We have 100 million data points. We have all verified, accurate. We have a process. We have a consensus algorithm. It's all on the blockchain using SQL, which is the standard for databases. And what we're trying to do is leverage that data. How do we now get builders to build financial products off the back of that data? Indexes. What kind of indexes could be created, and where could they be traded in the future as futures, perpetuals, or even then having contracts associated with those futures on chain? I think that's a big area that I'm really trying to push our team towards thinking like that. What partners do we need to make that possible? How do we drive that? How do we create on-chain loans that are tied to inflation? So we're working with a number of different protocols to have inflation-protected loans on the blockchain. Things like that. I think those are interesting aspects where we'd like to take Truflation.
That's good stuff. Well, listen, I love your products, and it's nice to finally meet you. I applaud everything that you're doing, and you're in that Balaji camp, by the way, in my mind. You're finding new, innovative ways to look at data. You're finding new, innovative ways to help people make good policy decisions, and people need it. They're sorely need it. They're desperate for it. Have you read The Fourth Turning? You ever read the book The Fourth Turning?
No, not before. No, I haven't.
Yeah, so it's a great book about how generations. There's always an upheaval. You typically get a system in place for 80 or so years, and then after that, Neil Howe and William Strauss, they wrote a book that says that we're marked by recurring generational cycles, and so we're at the end of the last 80-year time block. And so what ends up happening is you get a crisis, and then you get an upheaval, and then if things go well, you get a period of prosperity and stability. And then, unfortunately, you get an unraveling at the end of it as well. I mean, it's just unfortunately the nature of cycles. And if you look through human history, we generally have this thing going on. And the silent generation, frankly, is dying now. That's the generation from 1925 to 1942. Yeah. The baby boomers, 43, yeah. Or we say in the U.S. 46, but they say in the book 43 to 60, but in the U.S. we say 46 to 64. Yeah. That generation is getting ready, frankly, for retirement now. Yeah. Some of those already, particularly the ones in the 40s, are way into retirement. Yeah. And then, of course, you've got the generation X, and then you've got the millennials, and so on and so forth. But what ends up happening is we're coming now to the end of that last cycle. So, and again, I just think it's a very interesting book because it just implies that there's a lot of new things going on that weren't going on, and there's a little bit of a distrust of the existing status quo.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. But I do think that there's a lot of financial innovation taking place right now. I mean, I think that the stablecoin market's going to, boom. I just really think we're going to see a $2 trillion industry from a 200 today within the next 2 to 3 years. Every single bank's going to start issuing their own stablecoin using treasuries as the collateral. What Besant is trying to do with converting 10-year bonds to 100-year bonds, that's going to be an interesting transition. But then all of a sudden, I've got 100-year bonds. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to then issue, stable coins off the back of those because that's my collateral. And then we're going to see a whole growth in new liquidity being minted at a state level, which is going to allow the dollar to flourish around the world because I'm going to take my dollar and send it to somebody who needs dollars anywhere in the world outside of banking hours. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think that will bring in and inject a lot of, will get us drunk again, right? And we'll get drunk on debt because it's all collateralized debt obligations anyway. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And then to your point, maybe we see a boom, a bust again at some point.
Well, it's been great being on with you, Stefan. When am I going to see you? When am I going to get a beer with you? When do you come to New York?
I come to New York. I was going to be there during the Digital Asset Summit. I'll be there this year, actually in May.
Okay. When you come to New York, let me take you out for a beer. I'll get Pompliano and a couple of big Truflation fans to come out with us. All right.
Yeah. No, we'd love that. We'd love that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really very grateful.
Thank you. Really, thank you for your support all along the way. And
definitely,
thank you.
Any new stuff that you have on the company that you want publicized, let me know. You have my email now. I'll drop it into my Twitter feed and my Instagram. I'm very happy to help you.
Yeah, I'll send you our latest deck. So we're working on something. So
good.
I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
All right. Be well, sir.
Thanks, Anthony.
Bye-bye.